Fit 21. I want to thank you. I want to thank Undersecretary Lang for the work you did on looking at our digital assets regulatory framework, which we worked on mightily over the last year on a bipartisan basis. I think I particularly want to thank the White House for the Statement of Administration Policy, which says that you're eager to work with Congress on developing legislation for digital assets to ensure a comprehensive and balanced regulatory framework. You continue to commit for the balance of this Congress to work with the committee and in the Senate to achieve a regulatory framework for digital assets?
Yes, very much so. I'm happy to make that commitment, and we have worked productively together. It would be nice to see this reach a good conclusion.
On another topic related to digital assets, the SEC and the CFTC are consistently taking opposite legal positions in federal court on digital assets. In your capacity as the Financial Stability Oversight Council leader, what are you doing to bring the CFTC and the SEC together and be on the same page about this matter?
Well, I mean, it's not the job of the Financial Stability Oversight Council to adjudicate
No, but you're supposed to quarterback financial risk. Are you quarterbacking between the CFTC and the SEC on this dispute?
Not really. Our view, we have done a report on the risks connected with cryptocurrency and digital assets.
Right. In my final,
our risks have to do with holes where there's a lack
right.
of authority.
I agree, and you're working constructively with us. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, have there been any discussions among cabinet secretaries about invoking the 25th Amendment?
No.
Okay.
Face two-sided risks and have for some time, but now the labor market appears to be fully back in balance. We know that if we move too quickly, we risk unnecessarily hampering economic activity and possibly interfering with the ongoing expansion. We know that if we move too slowly, that we may undo the good we've done. Well, actually, it's the other way. If we loosen policy too late or too little, we could hurt economic activity. If we loosen policy too much or too soon, then we could undermine the progress on inflation. So we're very much balancing those two risks, and that's really the essence of what we're thinking about these days.
But the direction seems to be going towards lowering interest rates at some point, we would hope. That might be a wish rather than a direction.
I think if you look at the last summary of economic projections, I guess I would say it this way. It doesn't seem likely that the next policy move would be a rate increase. We don't take things like that off the table, but that does not seem the likely direction. The likely direction does seem to be as we make more progress in inflation and as the labor market remains strong, we begin to loosen policy at the right moment.
Thank you.
This debate around Basel III raised was that it is, my understanding at least, looked at, you may be all looking at revisions to liquidity standards as well, and wanted to see what you could say about that and whether that part of those standards are under review and what your thinking is.
Yeah, and I think that actually connects to the Silicon Valley Bank questions as well, where I think there seems to be a need to update assumptions about liquidity, and that's a separate proposal that we're also working on, and very important. I think we saw how fast that run was. It was just exponentially faster than prior runs. That's the new world, and that's some estimate of what that world is baked into things like the liquidity coverage ratio, for example.
Right, and wasn't that the case? If you had 25 cents on every depository dollar leave in 6 hours, no matter what the capital standards are.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I guess, there was a lot of talk after SVB that we need to think about internet-driven runs. A lot of us raised concerns. Candidly, I'm not sure I've heard any good proposals. So whether it comes from you guys or from folks listening, how we think about this new internet-driven world, and frankly, I think some of the irresponsible behavior by some of the folks that were major depositors in SVB who in many ways shouted fire in the crowded theater, and we've not seen any action there. So I would welcome additional ideas as well. And that,
Mr. Chairman, our economy is slowing, is it not?
Yes, although still growing at a solid pace.
Our unemployment rate is rising, is it not?
Yes, it is, although the labor market is still strong.
Our labor market is slowing, is it not?
Yes, but I'd say unemployment is still, is still low by historical standards. But yes, it is. We've seen cooling. Yes.
And I was looking at the recent jobs numbers. I know you've glanced at them too. About 3/4 of the net new jobs that were created in June were in government, healthcare, and social assistance. What does that tell you?
So that's a concentration. You'd rather see broader job creation than that. Those three areas have, in some reports, they've been, as it was this time, they've been the predominant creators of jobs. That tells you that job creation is becoming less broad in the economy and it's narrowing.
It tells you the government's creating those jobs, doesn't it?
Well, it's government. It's also in-person services. It's also some of it's government.
Manufacturing's been flat.
Yes, manufacturing's not creating a lot of new jobs these days.
Information technology shed jobs over the past 2 years, hasn't it?
I don't know.
Leisure and hospitality jobs have slowed almost to trickle.
So that's a place where there was a desperate worker shortage, and they've done quite a bit of hiring, but they're catching up now.
I mean, 3/4 of the jobs that are being created in our economy can be related directly or indirectly to our spending deficits, can't they?
In this single report, I don't know that healthcare is really government spending. I mean, that's something people.
Where do you think these hospitals get their money?
They may get it, but I mean, people are not. The spending on healthcare is not necessarily directly related to deficits. Is my point.
I would disagree with you. I mean, here's my point. We talk a lot about expectations in terms of inflation. How if we expect there to be inflation, we'll get inflation. It seems to me that consumer expectations play a bigger role in the economy than we cede to them. Most of our economy in America is consumer driven, is it not?
Yes.
Unlike, say, China, which is manufacturing driven.
Very much so.
And I listened to you cite the statistics about the economy, but most Americans don't feel good about the economy, do they?
No, and we don't tell people how to feel about the economy.
I mean, isn't it a fact that most people, if you ask them to define Bidenomics, they would say that's easy. We get to pay more to live worse.
I wouldn't touch
you don't want to answer that.
A sentence with that word in it.
Yeah. I mean, we can pretty this up all I guess my point is, and I know you're going to do this anyway, but I'd be really careful with this economy. I mean, people just don't feel better off today. And one can marshal a persuasive argument that, well, you should, compared to Europe or compared to China, compared to Canada. But feelings are feelings. People don't feel good about this economy. And it's primarily because of inflation. Let me use my final 30 seconds to ask you. I listened to my good friend, the chairman, give his opening statement. Do you think inflation was caused by corporate greed?
I hate to comment on something the chairman was speaking about.
Go ahead.
Well, so I will just say, we see at the Fed, we see inflation as when there's an imbalance between supply and demand, and we use our tools to work on the demand side of that and bring it back into line with supply. I
got 2 seconds. So when are you going to lower interest rates?
I'm today not going to be sending any signals about the timing of any future actions.
Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And you know I come back with that video just to make you think.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And make sure you're joining the Patrons. If you're not a part of the Patrons, make sure you're in the Cash App. And we have Trump for the first time bringing out Barron Trump. And make sure you go read that old book, When Barron Becomes President. Now we have Janet Yellen speaking on working on the framework of digital assets. And we know the three stooges, Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, and Gary Gensler's job is to get us moved over to the fourth industrial revolution, while the sheep stay distracted on things that don't matter. She clearly stated it out her own mouth. Remember, guys, I give you out the horse's mouth. Now, both of these testimonies, Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell, they were awful. They were all scripted. Hopefully tomorrow it's a whole lot better. But we have Jerome Powell stating the same thing. Labor market is good, but we know it's horrible. Plus, we have so much immigration. I don't even see how these people are even getting hired, because I've been to several restaurants, several stores where they don't even speak English. They hand you their phone and ask you to speak in it so you can translate it. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. Now we have Senator Warren brings up two good things, and that was Basel III and the capital requirements, liquidity standards, and then SVB collapse. And of course, Jerome Powell tried to go on a little speech on bank runs when it comes to the internet. And guys, remember who was responsible for that? Peter Thiel. And that's the reason why Senator Warren said no one was held accountable for that. Remember, he's the one that went online and made people do a bank run. And we know that's illegal. But if you're part of the NWO puppets, you don't go to jail. And then we have Kennedy. Of course, he brings in his comedy, but he brought in one great point that's going to go over a lot of people's heads. China's economy is based on manufacturing. Remember how the United States got out of the Great Depression? It came from manufacturing. Now we're service-based. And if you have my NWO book, I go into great detail in regards to that. But guys, even these tech jobs right now have laid off left and right. And remember, these are the good paying jobs. And then Kennedy came back and brought up another great point, that a lot of the jobs that are being created are based on the government. Again, the government is trying to make the United States economy more reliant on them instead of small business creating the economy. Remember, small business, the backbone of this economy right now, but they're being destroyed due to inflation, higher interest rates. They can't pay rent, and bankruptcies just keep moving higher and higher. And then we have politician Mr. Brown told the truth, but he's said this 100 times. It's nothing but the Hegelian dialectic, talking about the corporate greed. We know it's corporate greed. We had Biden do the executive order on groceries. He doesn't have to do that, guys. It's a handful of companies that own everything. They just go by 1,000 different names. It's only 5 companies that give you the illusion of choice. And how do they get away with this? That's right, the sheep sleep. That's the reason why they don't have to hide it. That's how they can continue on robbing you blind. And the person who says something about it, then of course, they get labeled crazy. We've seen this movie before. And remember, the Crypto Teacher told you. Because he knows, when it comes to the NWO, it's all planned out. But y'all have a wonderful day.
That devastation is real for the vast majority of Americans. And the pointing finger, I tell you what, whether it's the Biden administration throwing the Fed under the bus or any other way they can deflect from the real problem. I've seen it, committee hearing after committee hearing after committee hearing. My friends on the left want to point their fingers at anyone other than the real culprits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The progressive wish list, spending projects, and out-of-control regulations of this administration continues to eat away at American paychecks. And they continue to blame, whether it's shrinkflation, greedflation, skipflation. They're looking for someone to blame except for Bidenflation. the devastation of Joe Biden's economic policy continues to impact everyday Americans. The American people see through the facades and they want real solutions. It doesn't take a PhD economist to understand what the average American is experiencing under this administration. When President Biden and my Democratic colleagues pump trillions of dollars into our economy, those dollars increase the demand and pushes prices higher. It's that simple. The American people see and feel it every single time. And they see it, as I said earlier, the grocery stores, the gas stations, at the doctor's office. It's just undeniable the impact that this is happening. Just last week, we celebrated the birth of our country, the birth of this notion of freedom and liberty. But American families got slapped with the most expensive July 4th on record, with a cookout this year costing, on average, 30% more than it did just a few years ago.
Ohioans know, Americans know, that our economy fundamentally is not a fair playing field. Instead, we have a David and Goliath economy where the largest corporations use their power to funnel all the gains in the economy to the top, aided and abetted by too many people in this room. Corporations squeeze every last penny from Americans' pocketbooks and workers' paychecks. They don't even try to hide it anymore. The biggest corporations are charging more for less. Americans are frustrated. No, actually, Americans are pissed off. They have fewer and fewer choices. Those choices cost more and more. Keeping prices down is part of the Fed's mandate, but as many of us have made clear, the Fed's main tool to combat inflation, raising interest rates, does nothing to address the biggest causes of rising prices right now: corporate greed. Keeping rates too high for too long threatens workers' paychecks while keeping other costs high, particularly housing costs. Housing prices and rents continue to go up. It's no surprise that since the Fed began raising rates, the amount of income families need to qualify for a mortgage has nearly doubled. Homeownership has long been a bedrock of our middle class, but today fewer and fewer middle-class families can afford to buy a home. Higher interest rates are making our country's housing supply shortage worse, not better. We need more housing construction of all types. Higher rates lead to the opposite, and particularly make it harder for multifamily construction to work financially. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive for working families, whether it's for a mortgage or a car or anything else. Most people don't have the luxury of paying for everything in cash. And for the millions of Americans feeling their budgets stretched by higher prices, taking on credit card debt to pay for groceries and other essentials has become an option of last resort. But as more people struggle to pay down their debts, credit card interest rates are reaching all-time highs. Last month, Director Chopra testified in front of this committee and explicitly stated that credit card issuers are charging higher rates far beyond what they need to cover their costs. Corporate greed rearing its head again. Banks are making record profits at the expense of cash-strapped Americans. Every month that the Fed keeps rates high, Mr. Chair, it costs Americans money by making it more expensive to buy a house and to borrow money. Higher borrowing costs stifle future economic growth, leading to fewer homes being built, leading to businesses making fewer investments in the economy, and eventually, if the Fed doesn't stop, leading to workers losing their jobs. As they set economic policy, I urge the Fed to weigh these trade-offs and remember whose jobs and futures are at stake. It's why I've worked with my colleagues to hold corporations accountable and will continue to do that. For instance, we fought to cap insulin prices for senior citizens. We'll continue to fight to extend this price cap on life-saving drugs for all Americans. And why my colleagues and I on this committee it's why we're working to lower housing costs for more Americans. The Fed also continues its work to keep the banking system stable and ensure consumers' money is safe. Last year, the Fed and other bank regulators issued a proposal to update bank capital requirements, strong capital standards, and you've heard in this committee overwhelming support for strong capital standards. They're critical for the economy. It's our way of making sure that if Wall Street bets go poorly, which they often do, investors, executives, and shareholders should pay for it, not taxpayers. The biggest banks have spent obscene amounts of money attacking this Fed proposal. But you, the Fed, don't work for big banks. You work for the American people. Your concern should be developing capital rules that protect Americans' money, not protect bank CEOs' stock portfolios. The Fed needs to look past these shameless lobbying efforts and finalize a rule in the best interest of taxpayers. Another dangerous piece of the Wall Street business model that makes our banking system less safe is incentive-based compensation. This compensation model rewards risky behavior that enriches Wall Street executives in the short term, but makes banks more likely to fail. We saw the results of that model in 2008. We saw it again last year with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature. Other regulators have moved forward with a proposal to rein in these reckless incentives, but the rule, Mr. Chair, can't move forward without your and the Fed's moving on it. This rule is long overdue. The Fed must join this statutorily required effort as soon as possible. The Fed also has the important job of reviewing mergers and acquisitions between and among banks. Over the last several decades, we've seen the largest banks grow into massive, literally trillion-dollar companies, while thousands of small banks in rural communities in Northwest and Southeast Ohio, in small towns in those communities, in those areas, and all across America have disappeared. Consumers have lost trusted local banks. Small businesses have lost long-time reliable banking partners. Regulators like the Fed have the crucial job of guarding against mergers that reduce or eliminate competition and lead to bank closures or layoffs. I recently sent comment letters to the OCC and the FDIC on their current efforts. I expect the Fed to take the proper steps to ensure that its merger review process is robust and that it protects consumers and communities. Finally, Mr. Chair, you must ensure the Fed has high ethical standards. Fed officials should never again be able to profit from their positions by using confidential plans about Fed monetary policy and emergency programs to pad their investment portfolios. The board's latest update to its trading rules is simply not good enough. It still fails to establish the clear penalties needed for Federal Reserve officials who make investments in violation of the public trust. A rule with no consequences is really not much of a rule at all. The American people need to be able to trust that the Federal Reserve works for them in a time of deep cynicism that people have about the federal government overall. The American people need to know that officials aren't abusing their positions for personal gain. As chair, you have an important role to play to make sure our economy works for everyone, not just for Wall Street. The Fed's regional banks must do their part to hear from people and other stakeholders in their 12 districts to understand their needs.
Going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
And so we'll import Chinese-based CBDC technology. So it's going to be CBDC in a box provided to you by the People's Bank of China.
But every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every private business, every piece of real estate will eventually be a token on a blockchain, an entry on a ledger, permanent and immutable. We will have truth instead of trust, and we will save over $7 trillion a year. 6 to 8% of global GDP is wasted by the friction of the trust industry that's necessary when you have dual entry accounting. With triple entry accounting, which is what a blockchain is, we get rid of all of that friction. It's a beautiful future.
Like what you see in China and their social credit scoring systems, right? If we get identity wrong it could be a tool to enslave humanity, and if we get it right, it could be a tool to liberate humanity. And as an American, I'm obviously rooting for the one that's on the side of freedom.
Bitcoin is an international asset. And also, I do believe the role of crypto is it's digitizing gold.
I actually believe this technology is going to be very important. Look at it. We have been part of the huge revolution in investing through ETFs. We believe that ETFs will be changing the whole way we invest. Many people still use it as a means, people are investing it for indexing. No, the majority of people who are putting money in in ETFs are active investors that are buying exposure. The entire bond market is being transformed as we talk right now. I believe the next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities. And if we can have that distributed ledger that we know every beneficial owner, every beneficial seller, we all have our code of who's buying, who's selling, instantaneous settlement. And think about it, it changes the whole ecosystem.
Chinese bank ICBC has been hit by a ransomware attack, and the U.S. Treasury market, as a result of that, has been disrupted. This, according to the Financial Times. We're getting at more right now with Bloomberg's Shonali Bassick. Shonali, what do we know?
Listen, we have the Financial Times now reporting that ICBC, one of China's largest banks here, was hit with a ransomware attack. And remember, they're a very significant intermediary in the Treasury market. The SIFMA has told its members that this has been part of the reason here that the system is kind of clogged up, if you will, during that auction that we saw a little bit before. The attack had prevented ICBC, according to the Financial Times, from settling Treasury trades on behalf of other market participants. A large executive at a major bank also telling the paper that such a large party on the fixed income clearing corp creates major concerns, potentially impacting the liquidity of Treasury markets.
Now, it was not just a poor auction. It was absolutely lousy, and when the dealers have to step in to save a treasury auction, that's a rare occurrence. And
Cryptoteacher and the new World Order book, plus the 3 kids books, It's Time to Re-Educate. Also, new to cryptos, Coinbase, Bitrue, Binance. Do not forget book links and crypto links are in the description. The stock channel, guys. Don't forget to go like, subscribe, spread everywhere. You have your Kobo, your chip stocks, your banking, your gaming. While everybody's sitting at home, get on stocks, the Seaver, the biotech stocks. And while everybody's at home wishing, they were still getting that free money. What are they doing? Drinking and smoking weed. Don't forget about those stocks, and you have a wonderful day. The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs. And guys, I truly believe in this. When you look at the New World Order, they're the storytellers. And that's the reason why I wrote my New World Order book. But guys, now it's time to change the current generation. And I wrote 3 kids books. I love the Trinity because I understand the power that's in it. So I have 3 books. We have an opportunity to change the generation, to educate, not just me, but I want to show you that I take action on a daily basis. And I want you to take action on a daily basis. Whether it's your job, whether it's in your community, we have an opportunity right now to educate the masses. I posted this on my Twitter account. Please share, but this is a short clip of the 3 books. There's going to be a clothing line and action figures. Please get these books for your kids, nephews, cousins, friends, so therefore we can start the re-education now. Because as we see, the 4th Industrial Revolution foundation is definitely here. Robots, algorithms, drones, taking humanity out the picture. We have to re-educate. But let's get into the video.
Part 1. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save the village. Part 2. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save New York from COVID-33. Part 3. King Joshua and Grandma Tam goes to China.
It's mandatory to get part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this series. It's time to re-educate Generation Z.